Welcome back to Cordell Beaumont Maritime Podcast, where we speak with leaders across energy, commodities, shipping, and maritime to explore markets, technology, leadership, and the people shaping the industry. Today, I'm joined by James, who leads as CEO for Hypersphere Technologies, where we're going to dive into a number of topics: data protection, cybersecurity, and maritime, and overall leadership, hiring, and what the future holds, particularly around digitalization and as it accelerates across shipping and just global trade in general. James, great to have you on. Thanks for joining.
No, thank you, Cordell, for having me. I'm really honored to be a part of this. I think it's great. My background in Earth observation and also technology over the years has a lot of maritime use cases that I think we can discuss, and I'm also happy to discuss the data elements to it.
Awesome. Well, again, thanks for joining. Just kind of getting things started off. Would love to hear just a quick overview of your background and stuff that you're focused on today.
Yeah, absolutely. So I won't bore your audience with years of a resume summary, right? But what I will say is that I've been a practitioner and I've had many different positions on my way to becoming a CEO, which I think is critical for any leader, right? Yep. Sometimes you have to take the jobs that are the worst to learn how to do them, so you have an understanding of how to build the right company and even more importantly, what not to do. Yep. So I started my career out of chiropractic school at AT&T, which is kind of an odd journey. What I want you to know is I've carried a bag back when bags were a thing to carry on an airplane before iPads, and been on many planes around the world selling, telecommunications solutions. And ultimately, it was cool because at that time, AT&T was becoming a data company. So they're moving from a telephone company to a data company. And today, if you really think of it, how many people have a landline? Raise your hand. I don't think any have a landline anymore. Very few. But that shift was pretty cool to be a part of. And then I went out to a small company up in Massachusetts, and I learned switching and routing. I had one of the leaders from AT&T say, "Hey, JD, you have to take this gig." And I did. And it was one of the best things I ever was a part of, and that was in Terraces Networks. Later, that was one to become Extreme Networks, which does a lot of work for the NFL and Wi-Fi and data security and AI today. And then I went to Silicon Valley. I think that's the other kind of big transformation point in my life, is that, when you have an opportunity to work in Silicon Valley around those types of companies, whether it's a cybersecurity company or other, you should take it. And that taught me further how to sell, how to hone my skills, and not only technology, but then I moved into a really cool posture called channel and go-to-market. And John Atkinson, who is joining the company very soon to lead it in its next phase of growth, I had the opportunity to work for him twice at White Hat Security and then also once at Planet Labs. And I think that's where our maritime discussion will shift. But summary real quick, real sales guy, real product guy, worked at AT&T as a principal architect and have built some of the best technology companies with great exits along the way.
Love that. Well, thanks for that. Awesome. Obviously, very diverse background. Extremely unique. So, excited to jump into it. And I think you alluded to it. Data it's now one of the most valuable assets companies have, right? And it's also one of the biggest vulnerabilities, especially from a generic standpoint, from a maritime commodities aspect. I guess initial question from a data perspective, when you look at the data landscape today, what types of information do you consider to be most necessary or most critical for companies to protect?
Well, I think it really depends on the company and industry but let's talk about yours in maritime specifically. So if I put that hat on and look through that lens, I think we have to protect the analytic data that we generate from satellite-based technologies, whether it's traditional EO or SAR. I think that's really important. I think we always think that, a picture, whether it's a picture of a ship in a port, right, that we're analyzing, or whether it's a cargo manifest, or whether it's something like an AES tracking system, we have to really be cognizant that there's data about that data, and that data might be very sensitive. And if that sensitive data is exposed or leaked, right, or a hacker, let's just call him Joe today. Joe Hacker comes in and he sits and waits and he finds his opportunity using AI to have assistance at epic scale. Well, they can steal a credential, grab an encryption key, and decrypt that data, and it's the world's to see. and that can lead to some pretty severe consequences. But just to recap, any type of satellite data, port data, manifest data, log information data, shipping contents and container data, all that is what I would deem very sensitive. And often that's kept in a report, right? And that report is generated from satellite imagery or AIS information.
And we've had a few conversations about that, right, on and off, and so forth, and how companies are having to adjust to how they protect data, and whether or not it's necessary to some extent. I think we can both agree that it's pretty necessary for all of it, right? And I think you mentioned it. If there's exposure to it, and I guess from an organization standpoint, where do you see organizations maybe most commonly underestimating their exposure?
Yeah, I think there's a real big truth, and the reason I know it is because I've been bitten by it, right? And it's why I built the company, to solve a big crisis of, you think your data in an encrypted form is secure, and sometimes it might not be. Right. And the reasons are many. Well, let's just break down the two. And let me make a real big point here for everybody who is tuning in today. Encryption is the foundation of trust. So I don't want you to think at Hypersphere we roll our own encryption, because we do not, right? We use NIST-based, standards-based encryption, and then we add a special layer on top of that to make one thing possible. If the data is ever extracted, and let's just say you have your data, right? That data we spoke about, those data sets, whether it's imagery, shipping information, log files, or manifests or reports about them or analytics, that's probably going to be stored in somewhere like AWS, okay? Because we're not going to build our own data center to do it. When you store your data in AWS, storing it in encrypted form is great. You're checking a box. But what if somebody leaks a credential? What if there's a bad actor inside? What if the cloud provider isn't trusted? Do you think that AWS is going to write you a check because your data is now gone? They will not. Matter of fact, you're still going to pay your bill. Through history, right, it's the key that is not only the center of exchange and trust, but it's also the biggest vulnerability. And what we're seeing at the nation-state level, because that's where we started, nation-state defense, embedding our product, proving our product, no different than the way Boom today is changing supersonic flight. If you remember, like a Concorde could fly only over water supersonically because it wasn't allowed to do something else. Well, Boom's going to change that, right? And they've proven that technology, proved it in hard environments, and now they have literally $5 billion worth of committed orders, right? We did the same thing in defense, and the reason I mention that is twofold. One, when you can solve hard problems and protect the key and apply a obfuscation, that's a fancy word for another technology that makes data really difficult. Think of it like, scrambling something into something that can't be managed or read, digital sludge. You'll be able to simply rebuild that data with the right credentials. But if a bad actor, nation state or otherwise, or you have a cloud instance that goes offline and you need to hit a backup cloud instance, your data is never going to be exposed. So what's the cost? Zero. If you don't use the technology, whether it's ours or another competitors like us, right? I would encourage everybody to look at obfuscation technologies, because you simply just can't get around advanced attacks today, credential exposure, leaks of data, and if even stolen in an encrypted format. And this is really something you can validate, not with me, but everybody who's tuning in today can. Google's latest article on quantum computers and their advancement. So what I'll tell you is this: quantum computers are really good at math. They're real. And even more importantly, if you can have access to one, or even just a fast set of computers to randomly guess numbers, you can decrypt the data. And then what? All your secrets are exposed, yep. And you can be ransomed, held hostage. But even more, if I was a CISO, and I speak to many on a daily basis around the world, their biggest thing is reputational risk.
Yeah, I would imagine, that's probably not something you want getting around or you want exposure to from that stance, right? Because it can be a live or die by, right?
I think the reality is that long ago, we never thought quantum computers would do things with physics that we can't even estimate.
Yeah.
We thought it was good enough. Well, it's no longer good enough. So, this is not a commercial for Hypersphere. This is a commercial for a real problem in a real industry called maritime, which has major consequences if people understand where ships are, critical container information is, and valuable assets. So we just have to be responsible when we're addressing it.
Exactly. And just kind of doubling down on the risk aspect of it. How much of today's cyber risk is actually driven by supply chain and vendor dependency rather than internal systems?
So let's just use an example like Maersk, right? Most people here are familiar with that company. Think about how many third parties they interact with digitally on a daily basis. I think it's 1 to 5, 5 to 10, 10 to 20, or over 100. I'll tell you, it's the last.
Yep.
So when you have exposure in a supply chain, it could be an honest mistake, right? It could be somebody in a third party that exposes sensitive data. The reality is that could lead immediately to fines. It could lead to brand and reputational damage, and the risk equation is off the charts. And when cybersecurity insurance is the plan, trust me, it's not a plan. They don't pay out like they used to. So I think you have to think about it proactively, secure the pipeline, the supply chains, and really have your vendors and that credential exchange or key exchange managed appropriately.
No, and that obviously makes sense. And yeah, it's definitely becoming more and more important to make sure that you're having that security, right? And I guess kind of from specifically on the maritime side, and I'd love to hear your perspective on this, but in your mind, what keeps maritime CISOs and IT leaders up at night today and potentially within the next 5 years?
Yeah, I think risk, right? And their brand and their reputation, right? If there's one thing I know about that industry, it's built on trust. Mm-hmm. Reliably, you have to be able to get the goods from point A to point B and on time, right? I think you would probably agree. You have to, right? Any breakdown in supply chain or systems or a cybersecurity breach, number one, has to be announced. Number two, because most of those companies are public. But lastly, I want you to think about the downtime that can produce. If a system goes offline, a third-party supplier system goes offline due to a credential leak, an encryption key exposed, that could mean billions of dollars. Right. And that's where I get concerned, because the old way of thinking about putting, a fence around your house, that's the old way, right? If you start with the data first and protect it, you don't have to worry about the perimeter. Matter of fact, you can assume all those devices have failed. Right. And that's our posture. I'm not saying it's everyone's, but that's our posture, being preemptive, right? And taking those extra steps to make sure you have a good plan and a good risk management plan. And also, a plan of what happens when the hits the fan, right? You really have to think about that.
And, we talked a lot about, obviously, problems, solutions. One of those today, I think, happened, at least from companies we work with and just what we do in general, comes on the hiring aspect, right? Like that's where those solutions come about. The people you bring on board that are able to display that, find the right opportunities, and be able to actually pull that together in a sense, right? And I guess, when you're looking for people, when you're hiring, what really separates candidates that you can trust to come in and be able to do what needs to be done, be able to utilize the data, be able to find ways to actually have that type of impact?
Yeah, so there are a couple, right, and they're really hard to recruit for. One is give a damn. All right, and not everybody has that, right? But if you have give a damn, I feel like, if you've got good leadership and good technical leadership on board, you can certainly teach some of those more difficult skills that somebody who is maybe a smart software engineer might not have. But the other side of that, I think really importantly, is not just the give a damn, but it's integrity.
Yep.
Right? So I'll just tell you at my company, we have a handbook, it consists of a couple sentences. Don't lie to me and don't surprise me. And I think that transcends anything. I also think that you have to have people who have initiative, right? And I'll just say I'm a little old school. Maybe that's good, maybe that's bad. but you have to have initiative, that you have to have passion for what you're doing, the mission you're on. We happen to have a cool one here at Hypersphere because we were born in defense and intelligence. And, when somebody has data breach in the maritime industry, they might pay a fine, they might have a downtime. Well, only nation state side, somebody dies. Right? It's a bigger mission, bigger responsibility, but they have to be mission driven, and they have to be operationally able to not only get up and go to work every day without being told, but they have to then execute. Right. So hiring for those traits today, I think, is more difficult than it's ever been. Mm-hmm. Right. I think, and even recently, I this not from my company, but I had a friend of mine tell me that they had an interview for software engineers, and there was an AI assistant the whole time, basically mimicking the real person, while the real person was using AI to answer the questions, and they almost got the job, but it wasn't even the real candidate. Right, so I think there's a new level of inspection you have to do. But just to summarize again, give a damn, grit, integrity, right, and structural execution, all to me are a priority.
Yep, and obviously those are all characteristics that you can't find on a piece of paper. You have to do some deep diving and some digging into it, and which. That kind of leads me exactly to my next question. How do you evaluate those traits? How do you evaluate traits of give a damn, problem solving, judgment, and not just technical skill? Hey, I can do the work, but how do you determine those types of things?
Well, I'll tell you what I do that I've learned the hard way. I'm not going to say it's right for everybody, but here's what I do, right? And remember, we're an emerging technology startup. We've had some pretty cool accolades recently, and we're proud of them, but that gives us the ability to be selective when we hire. Mm-hmm. And so I don't take anybody's word for those characteristics. I make them prove it. So they come on, contract to perm.
Okay.
It's a try before you buy for me. It really is. I think our executive team and our technical leadership embraces that, because you're right. You can't just say you got it. You got to show it. And here's also what I've learned. Most leaders will say, well, give them 6 months. No. So that might be great if you have unlimited money and shareholders that will support you for eons, right? But in a fast-paced emerging technology company like us, at Hypersphere, we give them 30 days, right? We know quickly. Right, we measure what matters. We give them clear instruction. We give them OKRs. We put process around the business, and even more importantly, we expect them to need coaching during that time, and we will coach them. And a lot of times, if people are okay and acceptable to be coached and they're open to it, then they're going to be great leaders. Right? It's the ones who complain about it. Right? Put blockers, use diversion tactics to say, well, this is why I couldn't do A, B, C, or D. Right? That's not a team player. That's not a cultural fit for our company, and I would argue that in most, it's not a good cultural fit.
Sure. And usually if you have those types of people, there's not a lot getting done, right? There's a lot of talk, there's a lot of noise, but there's not a lot of actual problems being solved. And I think, with what you do, you can't have that mentality, right? Because your whole point of what you do is to actually solve problems. But if you're the ones actually complaining about it, then you're pretty much just sticking in the mud, for lack of better terms, right?
Yeah, no, you're 100% right. And I will tell you too, as an emerging startup company, right, it's venture funded, remember my job as the CEO of the company is to deliver shareholder value. We have shareholders, right? Mm-hmm. Not only shareholders, we have lead investors, right? We have people that wrote early checks. So it may sound brutal, but you got to fail them out fast, right? And then you have to find better talent. But here's a great thing along the way. You're going to get better at it.
Yep.
Right. And as a leader, I feel like any given day, if I can make 50% of my decisions that are good, right, then I'm doing an okay job. Right. Because it's hard. Right. It's the hardest thing you ever do in your world and my world is hiring great people. Last thing I'll say on the hiring front is I've been really impressed by some of our recent hires, who are just rock star engineers. We built our own recruiting pipeline, partnering with a major institution called Rose-Hulman, who's the #1 engineering undergraduate school in the country. But these kids who've come in, they spend time in our internship program, kind of a try before you buy. They prove it. We teach them because they don't have the skills coming out of college, even though they're brilliant, that they really need. And I've been really impressed that these kids are open to using tools. And I'm going to say it, I'll just say it easily, right? Any company today not using AI models or AI capabilities inspected by a human to go faster is going to get left behind, right? And I'm really proud of these kids that are able to do it for us. But that's the other thing, a skill that I look for is that tell me how you use AI. Tell me the most recent, hardest problem you've ever solved, right? And that's not me, right? That's a quote from Elon that I read in the book that he wrote, right? But at the end of the day, those are irrelevant questions and they're fair.
Exactly. And I posted on LinkedIn the other day the difference between AI becoming us and making us better using AI, right? And I think that's where a lot of people are nervous now, is being replaced or being overwhelmed by it. And if you find out how to make it work for what you do, all it's meant to do is improve. But if you're just allowing it to think for you, that's where, okay, maybe you need to take a step back and understand what the best way to utilize it is for yourself and for the organization you're in. So
Well, I think that's a great point. I didn't read the post yet, but I'll go back and look at it. But I would say it's like the typewriter, right?
yeah,
So we all thought that the computer would outpace it. It did, but it really didn't eliminate jobs. It created a lot more.
yeah,
I think that's what's going to happen with us in AI too. Not to speak too much in the future, but what I do believe fundamentally is this. When a big company like an AWS announces like 30,000 layoffs, that was a bigger plan.
yeah.
It wasn't just all about AI, right? I think in everything that we do, training yourself is something you have to do to be a lifelong learner. And I would encourage anybody here, whether you're in a chair like yours, helping industry leaders hire the best, or whether you're in a chair like mine, where you have to really build deep tech to solve very complex problems in very big markets, that you invest in that self-training, right?
Yeah.
College is great. If I had to go back to do it again with the tools we have today, would I do it the same way? Probably not. But I would still do the college work for undergrad because, frankly, you need those soft skills. However, I think we've got better training today and more opportunity. Even at 54, I am more excited now when I get up than I ever have been before, because what we've accomplished in the time that I've been alive as humans, as a society, and globally is pretty unbelievable.
No, I love that. Yeah, and I think we're starting to get a grasp on it, right? I think we're getting past the fear stage, and now we're going, okay, it's here. What do we do with it, and how do we do it? And I know you mentioned obviously we're evolving. So is hiring, right? And I guess, final question on that regard. How do you see hiring priorities evolving? COVID was one thing. We're trying to get out of that phase now. Now companies, from what I'm seeing, are taking a step back and really focusing on quality, and not only how can you get using the data, but how can you put it and use it in front of clients as well? Just kind of walk me through, how you expect it to evolve over the next few years.
Yeah, I think it's going to be for us. I'll speak to me, and I'll give you an industry view as well. Remember, I'm in cybersecurity more than I'm in maritime, but maritime is a use case for us, right? Big industry for us, big targets. Here's what I'll say. I think when you look at hiring people today, it is all about quality, okay, and technical capability. Okay, and we've talked about this for years. And although, when I started my sales career way back when dinosaurs roamed the earth, here's the thing. They said, well, you have to be a relationship guy. Well, today, I want you to think about this. Customers know more about you before they ever talk to you than you would ever expect. Okay, so they really sometimes don't even want the human interaction until they know they've narrowed that scope down. So I think you have to hire with the same type of mentality. Cast a wide net, narrow it down. That hasn't changed. That's just blocking and tackling, right? 101. Once you get to that, filter of, let's go from 100 down to 50, from 50 down to 3, from 3 down to a group selection process and a technical skills evaluation, I think then you can make good decisions. But without the following, and I mean it, without really understanding what the person has done, validating it, double checking it. Can't take people's word for it. You really have to dig in and call references, and it can't be, I'll just say it, sorry if I offend anybody, it can't be bullshit.
Yeah.
Right? They really have to have done the work. Show me the work, and then show me that you've kept your skills up. Show me that you followed and improved yourself over the time you started versus today. And for me, that is a big requirement. And that's how you double check, but also how you get high caliber people. And still, I'll just say, because I'm truth about it. I've still got it wrong a couple times. With all that work, I've gotten it wrong.
Yeah, no, same. I mean, that's such an importance for someone even in my space, right? When we're working with clients that we're having to find top talent for, because one, clients aren't just going to pay for, they might hire a B average person if they're not paying for it. But when it comes from us, they're paying whatever the amount may be, and we have to make sure it's actually worth it, right? And so that's where you have to ask the right questions. That's where you have to actually be open-minded, because there's a lot of times where you think, okay, this is the ideal person before you ever speak to them. So really honing in on asking the right questions and actually knowing what you're looking for. When you have those two things aligned, I think that, in my opinion, makes the hiring process a lot easier for everybody.
Yeah, I think you said something that's really important too. I think there's been a posture and a move away from hiring, talent shops to find that and narrow it down. But I don't think there should be. I think when you take it for granted and think you can do it all yourself, you're going to make even more mistakes.
Yep.
And because people like yourself and your company see thousands of candidates a year versus just 5 to 10 or 100, you have a different optic level lens to look through. And look, it's probably the equivalent of a great scope on a rifle that a warfighter might use to take out an enemy, right? It's really a high powered device. And guys like us, right, even in startups, when you have to hire talent and they leave, one, it's usually a fault. If you look at yourself in the mirror on the executive, sometimes it's not, right? But the reality is it's expensive. It's expensive. You have to ask yourself the question, do you want to pay the fee up front or do you want to pay severance and all the things that go along with that? And then deal with the risk of, things like litigation, right? If somebody even questions it in today's world, that's still something that amazes me, right? Lawyers still get rich. People still believe they can sue for anything in the world. And, reputational damage still has to be protected at the company level. But I think working with people like yourself in an industry, this is just my personal opinion. It's not a commercial. It's smart.
Yep. No, I agree. And yeah, obviously you got to make sure it's the right partnership, right? You got to make sure that the people you're working with are actually going to make sense and can actually do the job and add that value. And so that's the part that I think getting over that hump of both sides seeing it, right? Like, we can help you because we see what's going on daily from a market standpoint. You can help us by making sure that we're actually supplying what you need, right? And I think from a leadership standpoint, obviously it's, in a high stakes environment, especially where risk, security, operational uptime intersect, it's uniquely challenging in a sense. And, from your perspective, what's the hardest decision, I guess, from an overall aspect throughout your career, what's the hardest decision you've had to make up to this point?
That's a real broad question. Let's try to narrow it down.
We can narrow it down. We can talk about it in the last 5 years.
I think a couple things that it's so broad. Listen, I think I'll give you a couple excerpts from an investor conversation I had last night. Late, one of my lead investors said to me, "Well, what have you really learned as you reflect back on 2025?" I said a couple things. Number one, I've learned to shut my mouth more and listen. I said, number two, I've learned that even as a CEO, when I'm tempted to do everything myself, I have to trust my leadership to do it. And that's hard. It's hard when you have, a skill set of sales and technology and they kind of intersect, and you also understand go-to-market, and you've proven it because you've really got that experience. You've really done the work over the years in your career. But, being quiet and watching your team grow and supporting them, that's important. And something that I've had to work to improve on.
No, I love that. And that, that trust has to be there, right? But that also goes into making sure that you're hiring the right people. in a sense of kind of the unknown, right? And obviously having a startup and managing that and trying to build that upwards, how do you approach risk when the stakes are that high and information is incomplete?
Yeah.
What's kind of your thought process? What's the way of attacking?
Yeah, so it's very different than the average startup, right? So when we built this company as a team, we set out to do something that was the equivalent of building a brand new jet that had to pass all the most rigor inspection before it could be trusted. Okay, so think about where we started: nation state defense, embedding our software into leading products that support the warfighter and protect them.
Yep.
So our standards are high. They can't be build cool software, put some customers on it, build some ARR, and then let's get a better valuation. Let's just flip the thing and sell it. Like, we had to structurally build the foundation first, battle test it, prove it. No different like Boom, right? I'm a big fan of that company. I don't know anybody there, right? I've just studied them, but look what they did, right? So they built a prototype, they tested it, tested the heck out of it. Now they're going to build the jet, and now they're going to dominate an industry with $5 billion worth of orders. That's the difference between the way we went to market and what we did with our investors and money early, before we even got to the point where we could sell into the enterprise. And now we're there. But it was because we took the time to build the jet, right? If you've ever gone to a private airfield, right, it's funny. I've only had the chance to do it a couple times, but the reality is, when you get out of the jet, there's usually a Rolls Royce or a real nice transport car waiting for you, but you're definitely not driving, right? So it's a different level of responsibility, whether it's for the enterprise executive or the corporation with the brand, or whether it's, a warfighter who can't afford to have their data intercepted, because it doesn't mean access to just them. It means they might know from an enemy perspective where in the heck our troops are, what they're using to drive, and even more importantly, what that mission weapon system looks like.
No, 100%. And you touched on it a bit, taking time, right? Not over speeding or going too fast, not going too slow. But in a world where everyone wants it now and where everything needs to be done immediately, how do you balance that, right? Like, how do you balance speed versus caution when making decisions that, whether or not they affect large systems or global operations? How do you process that, or how do you balance
You
it?
say no more, and this is what I learned building startups, not the first, second, or third, but now. You say no more, and here's what I mean. Yes is easy. No sometimes is hard. It leads usually to my second favorite word, called yes. Right? First favorite is no.
Yep.
Because I think you have to really be one to deselect. And let me tell you what I mean by that for me and the way we built this company. So when you choose an investor to write you your first check at the seed round stage, that's critical, right? And you can't do it in a vacuum. Like, you have to be selective, and they have to buy into your mission. So two things, right? One, you don't cast a broad net. You find people who understand your market and believe in your mission and the problem you're solving. And if you align, you continue that due diligence all the way till you get the check. I'll just tell you something. In the case of Lightning Capital, I'm proud to be, one of their most bright and cool investments ever, because, it was 74 points of diligence over 19 months. That's a lot, right? Right, but because one founder had built a telecommunications company, had a finance background globally, and then the other of that venture fund is an author of many cybersecurity books, right? And it built a company and then sold it, and built another one and then sold it. So they understood. And I mention it because it's just like the Boom story. You got to have time to build the prototype, right? Have they sold anything yet? Nope. What'd they do? They built the plane. They proved the plane. If you don't have that thesis right, then you're just sniffing, and you'll probably end up like one of the many startups who gets a seed round, never gets to an A, fails out fast, and gets celebrated because, they had an idea. Well, ideas no longer really just work. You need validation and proof points, and you also have to have people believe in your mission. And if at any point that's not aligned, well, then you really did it wrong, right?
Agreed. And no, you hit the nail on the head. I think we live in a society today where you got to see it to believe it, right? And that's just how we operate now. Kind of segueing, and I know you mentioned you don't want to jump too much into the future, but I'm going to stretch you a
Sure.
little bit.
Right.
Obviously AI, data, cybersecurity. Looking ahead, the pace of innovation it's accelerating, right? Particularly within those three sectors. I guess from your stance, how do you see AI reshaping cybersecurity, data protection, not only within the next 3 years, but how have you seen it do it up to this point?
Yeah, so it already has. So I want you to think about innovation at this level. It's not by the hour anymore, it's by the minute, if not by the second. So AI is really machine learning, right?
Yep.
Wasn't invented, this year. It was invented back in the late 50s, right? And what I would say about AI is, the average intelligence of it is speeding up quickly. So I think like 2 months ago, it was equivalent to Einstein's EQ of 155. Soon, it will. Yeah, really, you can look that up. Use the Google machine. Check my facts. So can everybody here that's tuning in today? But I think you can find it to be accurate.
Yep.
Even more importantly, if you've got that kind of IQ, it means you understand a lot. And look at the pace of it growing. Right, more GPUs than ever, more data centers than ever, more training data than ever. Right, most people opt in when they use a GPT. They don't even think about their own data they're giving to the company to be able to train and get better faster. Right. The scary part about AI is the way smart people use it, though. So let me tell you about two things that happened already this week. So Nike, the great corporation that, we all probably have a product or bought one over the years and put it on our feet or on our bodies. They had, several terabytes of sensitive data stolen from an environment, and that wasn't real good for them because it contained all the designs of their next generation product. This week, China was able to use Claude to break into. Well, first they simulated an attack, right? And they trained the model to go ahead and execute and break into many networks, right? Stealing credentials and keys. And you talk about catastrophic failure. When you can trick models to become hackers, that's scary. And we haven't even begun yet, right? I saw this problem coming 20 years ago with the advent of quantum computing, and it's only going to get better and faster and more structured. But, it scares the heck out of me, which is why, look, regardless of whether we do well financially or not, which we will, but the mission is still this, right? Given the ability to protect data or not, we should protect it, and we should do it at that level, at the data level itself. And we shouldn't trust anybody, right? None. And I'm scared because I think two things will happen. One, AI will become dominant. I think by 2029, we will have it more intelligent than all of humanity. And I think structurally, what scares me the most is that humans could break down. Right, throughout history and time, humans given choices to extend their life, or in the worst case, extend their life, or experience something they haven't experienced before, like death. What are they going to do? They'll choose life, right? So I think we have to be cautious. I think we have to put guardrails around it. I think we should embrace it, right? But look, you ever watched a movie and you see something that really is happening today, and you watched that movie 4 years ago?
Oh yeah.
Well, if we all remember Terminator, I don't think that's too far off.
Yep. Yeah. No, I think you're spot on. Yeah, and I mean, I think that's the point, right? Is figuring out how we can live with it, because it's already here, right? There's no going backwards now. Now it's making sure that not necessarily we can have a like full control, but at least a grasp on what's coming and what to expect, right? And there's so much hype around it. There's so much excitement. But from your point of view, what's currently overhyped versus maybe something that's currently underappreciated?
Yeah, I think the overhype is that you can just input an advanced prompt and have it come out perfect. Yeah, look, I just attribute it to what we do, right? I'll give you an example. We used Claude Opus to write some new code for us the other day, but it wasn't right. Okay, so our code is written in an advanced language called Rust. It's really, really cool. Most people here, if they got tech chops, will say, well, that's smart. It's very hard to do, very expensive. But, Claude did a good job, right? Still, but it had to have interpretation by the human. Okay. I will say that if you just think you can blindly trust it without deep inspection, like the interview process, you're probably going to have a big red flag on your hand. And then I would think the other thing really is too trusted is, right, today, even in GPT or even in Claude or Google Gemini, right? You can connect your applications to it, okay? Whether it's Gmail, but you that inference and context, they don't have it yet, okay? And so you have to be really one to take the extra time to read, to inspect, to add the right context. You should use it as a tool, okay? That's what it is. But it's not a replacement for a human being yet, right? And the things that humans are really good at, right? Which is reasoning to this day. Now, it will become good at reasoning, trust me. But it still won't be a human, okay? I think our little brains are underestimated by a lot. And I think that as humans, the soft skills are something that a model will never have.
Yeah. No, that makes so much sense, and I think that's kind of where it's right. Where we still got to remember, there's got to be a human piece. We just have to find out, right? Like where can we really put our value? And I think people need to make sure they don't forget that aspect, right? Like if you're construction, you might have they replace the hammer with a drill now, but you still got to have the human press the button. You still got to be accurate with it. You still got to put the nail in the right place, right? So I think making sure we're doing it, but putting it right where it needs to go, that's what's going to define us.
It's oversight. Think of a surgeon using robotics, right, to be more precise, even using AI for advanced diagnostics to find things quicker. But do you really want the robot in the room without the human?
Nope.
I don't. Right. So to your point, I think it's going to happen. I think, though, I'll end on this one with you with AI. I think AI is going to be massively disruptive, right? And I'll tell you what's good about it and what it means. I'll just tell you for my company and our investors. So if I told you I could build $1 billion business with under 30 people, would you believe me?
I'd hesitate.
I'm going to prove it.
Yeah.
Going to prove it. And that's because of automation, AI, processes, workflow, and the fact that you can get your software so good, it can be click ops, right? You can build packaging, you can build installation run books, you can build integrations that literally are automated, right? And so that's the benefit to me of AI. It's also the benefit to investors. When I look at, the upside for people like, you and me who still probably have a 401k and think about depending on these companies to perform for us so that we can supplement the Social Security that we probably will never get. I think we have to embrace it, but we also have to be realists and understand that, look, if you've got a basic, I'm going to pick up the phone and answer the job, right? That's not going to survive. Yeah. Right? So I will give you a fun story anecdote about AI. So I pick up the phone and I check on my BMW that's in service, and Willow answers the phone. Okay, now I'm not saying Willow can route me to the right person, but it did get me quickly to Alex Pearson, who answered my question. And in the past, I remember this. I've been buying from the same dealership for many, many years. I remember when they had the receptionist, right? There's not the receptionist anymore.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, and that staff used to be vast. And that's just one little example of somebody used to answer the phone to schedule an appointment with your service representative.
Exactly.
I think those types of things are going to be transformed. But I think, again, and I said it earlier, it's really important to keep your skill set up.
Yep.
I don't care what you do, whether you flip a burger or whether you answer a phone, right? I mean, you can improve yourself, but listen, it goes back to give it in grit and execution. You can't teach somebody to do that. They have to want to do it.
100%. I think that's where we're, at least in the States, right? Convenience is so important now, but I think that's, it's good and bad, right? Like we want to have it there, but you still have to work for it. You can't forget that piece of it. If you forget that piece, then convenience runs your life. And now you just want everything to come to you and you never want to go find it. And so I think that's potentially one of the biggest risks is, hey, we have AI, but let's make sure we use it how it's supposed to be. Let's not just let it use us in a sense. And one last final question on here. I know I've kept you a lot longer than we typically do.
Yeah,
but
we certainly can talk a lot longer. I think both of us could. It's fun when you have smart people and you're actually talking about something that's really important.
100%.
Not only to your base, but also to others who might be tuning in, on a social media platform and said, "Wow, I didn't think of this." Right?
Yeah, and this
is just about an industry.
Exactly. And it's so important for people, I think, to hear. And it's such a great perspective because you don't think about all of it, right? Like you think about maritime data, but you don't think about, what happens if it gets attacked. And so seeing from an overall perspective is always beneficial. And I guess that leads me to the final question.
Sure.
What excites you the most? Not just cybersecurity, just data in general. What are you most excited about heading forward?
Well, I think two things. One, I'm excited about what we're going to do for our country, okay, and all the lives we're saving and will save, right? So when you have that core ethos, getting up every day is really fun, right? Because you're deploying to solutions, to where they matter the most. I think the other side is, for me, what excites me every day when I get up is we don't sell direct, right? We sell through an ecosystem of partners, and we OEM our technologies to some of the best companies in the world. When I look at that, it's building those relationships and integrations and working to solve real complex problems that I love to do. And it's funny because I give two of my good friends, Will and Robbie, who started Planet Labs and created that into the great Earth observation company it is. I remember Will giving us a little informal speech over lunch one day in the office in San Francisco, and he said, I don't know that we know our greatest use case yet. Right, and even though Planet has now mastered many of them, I still think they've got a long way to go. Right, and Will eventually find it, or maybe he won't. But when you work in that domain, in that theater, solving these real hard problems, I don't know what else could make you happier. But the last part I'll say about it is when you know you're making sure our nation state secrets are safe, boy, is that exciting. And that gives you a purpose, a mission, and worth that it transcends an individual. And everybody at our company, I can tell you, from the moment they go to bed to the moment they get up, even on a weekend, you should see the level of resilience and the excitement. I don't think it's a job to me. I think it's a responsibility.
I think with what you do, I think that's a great way to obviously represent it, right? It's a duty in a sense, and it's one that sounds like obviously you're doing well at. So, James, this conversation has been fantastic. Really appreciate you joining us and sharing insights. For everyone listening, thanks for tuning in to the Cordell Beaumont Maritime podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe and follow us for more at Cordell Beaumont with more conversations from leaders across maritime, energy, and commodities. Thank you.